The first coat I mended that morning had a burn mark shaped like a crescent moon above the left pocket, which meant the owner had stood too close to a street heater, pretending he was warmer than he was. I knew that kind of pretending better than most people. I had a small, portable sewing machine balanced on a storage crate behind the donation center, a paper cup of convenience store coffee going sour beside my elbow, and rent due in 9 days. The coat was brown wool, thin at the elbows, with 2 missing buttons and a lining that had given up before the person wearing it did. I replaced the buttons with mismatched ones from my tin and reinforced the pocket with a piece of navy fabric cut from an old school blazer. The work would not make the coat elegant. It would keep wind from slicing through it. Most days that felt like a respectable ambition. My name was Lee Yun-jo. I was 29 and Omega, and the official title printed on my business card said Textile Restoration Assistant, though I had stopped handing those cards out after my old employer closed the workshop and vanished with 3 months of unpaid wages. Now I repaired clothes for a community shelter in Uljiro 3 mornings a week, altered theater costumes at night when the director remembered to pay me, and accepted private mending jobs through an account called Needle After Rain, which my friend Ju Min called poetic and my sister called hard to search. I lived in a rooftop room with a ceiling that sweated in summer and rattled in winter, kept basil alive in a chipped mug, and marked my expenses in a notebook because banking apps had a cheerful way of making debt look temporary. My ambition was not glamorous. I wanted a street-level repair studio with heated floors, 2 industrial machines, a rack of rescued fabrics, and a sign that said, "We fixed what others discarded." The trouble was that landlords preferred deposits to dreams, and my family had eaten my savings long before I knew there was a name for what my father had done. At 10, the shelter opened its front doors. Cold air rolled inside with the people waiting outside. Elderly men with red knuckles, day laborers between jobs, mothers collecting children's coats from the free rack, students whose backpacks looked more expensive than their shoes. I kept my head down and worked quickly, stopping only to measure sleeves, fix zippers, or reassure people that no, a torn lining did not mean the whole coat was ruined. Omegas were expected to be tender in obvious ways, with soft voices and lowered eyes. I had tenderness, but it came through reinforced seams and spare buttons, through remembering that Mr. Choi liked extra room at the shoulders because he slept in his coat, through saving good wool scraps for children's cuffs. My dignity was not loud. It had small teeth. Just before noon, my sister Harin called while I was kneeling near the heater to pin a hem. I considered letting it ring. She never called during the day unless she had run out of lies to tell herself. When I answered, her voice came thin and bright. "Yun-jo, are you busy?" "Yes," which means the bad news should be short. She gave a laugh that had no humor in it. The creditor came to the salon again. I stood slowly, the hem still pinned between my fingers. "Which creditor?" "The one with the gold watch. He said Appa signed another guarantee under my name." The shelter noise blurred for a second. My father had been gone for 2 years, hiding somewhere south of the city, or abroad, or dead in a way that left paperwork behind. He had loved borrowing money as if debt was evidence of future success. He had used my name once, Harin's twice, and our late mother's medical insurance until the hospital called me in a voice reserved for people who had already lost. "Don't talk to him alone." I didn't. Aunt Misuk was there. That was worse. Aunt Misuk had a talent for inviting shame indoors and offering it tea. What did she say? That maybe if I had married better, people wouldn't think our family was easy to step on. I pressed my thumb against the needle case until the metal edge bit. Harin was an alpha, older than me by 4 years, broad-shouldered and quick with scissors, but years of cleaning up after our father had made her flinch at knocks. "Send me the documents, pictures of everything, the watchman too if he comes again." You sound like you can fix it. I can sew a sleeve back on after a dog eats it. Compared to that, men with gold watches are amateurs. This time her laugh sounded closer to real. You didn't eat breakfast, did you? I had coffee. That is a drink, not loyalty to your organs. Send the documents. She hung up after promising twice that she would lock the salon door. I returned the coat to Mrs. M, who watched me with the alert sympathy of someone who had survived enough to know when not to ask. Family? Always. Family is a coat with too many people pulling at the sleeves. I smiled despite myself. Then I need stronger thread. By mid-afternoon, snow began to fall in wet grains that turned the pavement into black glass. I packed the finished coats into clear bags and carried 2 boxes to the outreach van. The shelter director, a beta woman named Director Park, handed me an envelope with my weekly pay. It was lighter than it should have been. "The city grant is late," she said before I asked. "I'm sorry. I'll add the rest next week." Next week was where poor people stored all impossible things. "It's fine." "It isn't." "No," I agreed, slipping the envelope into my bag. "But saying that takes longer." She looked toward the street. "Can you take the last box to the subway entrance? Outreach team got stuck near Jongno." I glanced at the sky and then at my own coat, black padding worn shiny at the cuffs. "Give me the address." The subway entrance was only 6 blocks away, but winter makes distance arrogant. I dragged the box on a folding cart whose left wheel squeaked like a mouse with legal complaints. Near the second intersection, a group from one of the corporate charity events nearby spilled out of a hotel entrance in tailored coats and expensive scarves. I recognized the type, donors who wanted photographs with suffering as long as suffering had washed its hair. One woman looked at the box, then at me, and whispered something that made the man beside her snort. "Poor Omega Outreach aesthetic," he said, not quietly enough. "Very authentic." I kept walking. Poverty teaches you to choose which insults deserve oxygen. At the crossing, the light turned red, and a small child in a yellow knit hat stepped off the curb anyway. I saw him before the driver did. He was maybe 5, round-faced, crying without sound, one mitten gone. His eyes were fixed on the hotel doors behind me, but his feet carried him toward traffic. I dropped the cart handle and ran. The box tipped, plastic-wrapped coat sliding across slush. A taxi horn screamed. I caught the child around the middle and twisted us both back so hard my knee struck the curb. Pain flashed up my thigh, hot and bright. The taxi stopped close enough for dirty water to spray across my shoes. For 3 seconds, nobody moved. Then the child began sobbing into my chest, small fingers grabbing my collar. His coat was expensive, pale gray cashmere, entirely useless because the front had come open and snow had soaked through his sweater. I looked toward the hotel, expecting some frantic parent, but the corporate group only stared as if I had ruined the arrangement of the afternoon. "Hey," I said softly to the child, breathing through my knee. "You're all right. What's your name?" He hiccuped. "Jun." "Jun what?" He shook his head, face crumpling again. His hands were cold. I unzipped my padded coat and wrapped it around his shoulders before I could think through the consequences. Underneath, I had only a thick sweater patched at one elbow and a thermal shirt that had seen kinder seasons. The cold arrived immediately, sliding under my clothes with professional confidence. I tucked the coat around the child and fastened the zipper. It swallowed him from chin to knees. Behind me, the man from the donor group laughed. "Look at that. The poor Omega has a prince now." The woman said, "Careful, he might keep the child for the coat." I turned my head. There are moments when survival recommends silence, and dignity recommends a witness. I was tired enough to choose the second. You saw a child nearly get hit by a taxi and found a way to make yourself uglier. That takes talent. The man's smile flattened. Do you know who you're talking to? No, that's the point. I'm judging you only by the available evidence. The crossing light changed. A black sedan stopped at the curb with no screech, no drama, only the absolute precision of money that expected roads to clear. Another car slid behind it, then a third. Doors opened. 3 Alphas stepped out. The street changed around them. Not physically, perhaps, but people rearranged themselves by instinct, conversations dropping, shoulders turning. The first Alpha was tall and broad, wearing a charcoal overcoat without a scarf, his hair cut short, his face composed in a way that made expression seem unnecessary. The second looked nearly identical at first glance, though his mouth had a sharper curve and his eyes moved faster. The third was younger, or carried youth differently, with longer hair tied back and a phone already in his hand. Triplets, I realized after a stunned second, though each held himself like a different answer to the same difficult question. The child in my arms lifted his head. Uncle Tae Sung. The first Alpha's gaze moved from the child to my coat around him, then to my scraped knee, then to the scattered donations in the slush. He did not rush, which angered me until I saw his hand clench once at his side before relaxing. Discipline with him looked less like coldness and more like violence forced into a narrow hallway. "Jun?" he said. His voice was low enough that the child stopped crying to listen. "Are you hurt?" The child shook his head and pointed at me. "Hyung fell." The second Alpha stepped toward me. I shifted back with Jun in my arms before thinking. The first Alpha noticed. "He will not touch you without permission," he said. The second Alpha stopped immediately, eyebrows rising as if he was not used to being corrected in public. I was going to check the kid. Ask. It was absurd that this mattered. It was also the first useful thing any rich man had done all day. "May I check him?" the second Alpha asked, more amused than offended. I looked at Jun. "Do you know him?" "My uncle Jun," Jun whispered. "Then yes." Jun crouched, quick and competent, checking Jun's wrist, head, knees. The third Alpha collected my fallen coats from the street without waiting for servants to appear. He shook slush off the plastic bags and stacked them back into the box, his expensive shoes darkening at the edges. The donor man recovered enough courage to step forward. "Director Han, this Omega caused a scene. He insulted—" The first Alpha looked at him. Nothing else happened. No threat, no raised voice, no visible signal. The man stopped speaking as if someone had placed glass under his tongue. Director Han. I knew the name then, because everyone in Seoul who worked near old markets, logistics warehouses, private security, or construction knew the Han family even if they pretended not to. Han Tae-sung, sometimes called the Alpha King in business magazines that liked dangerous metaphors, eldest of the Han triplets, acting head of Hanyul Group, and rumored heir to an organization old enough to have learned manners. His brothers, Han Yi-jun and Han Seo-jin, handled legal strategy and public relations, depending on which gossip account one believed. Their family donated to hospitals, owned buildings, settled disputes no court ever saw, and appeared at charity galas with faces suitable for portraits. I had just argued beside one of their lost children while wearing a sweater with a patched elbow. Tae-sung removed his overcoat. I stiffened. "No." His hand paused halfway. "I'm not being dramatic," I said. My teeth had started to chatter, which weakened the statement. "The child needs warmth. I can walk." "You are shaking." "I have a talent for multitasking." Jun made a small sound. Seo-jin hid his mouth behind his fist. Tae-sung stepped closer anyway, slowly enough that I had time to refuse again. He held the coat open but did not put it on me. That difference lodged under my ribs. "Then allow me to correct the imbalance you created, saving my nephew." I didn't create an imbalance. I prevented a funeral. Yes. No argument, no performance of gratitude, just the word, heavy and exact. I looked down at Jun, whose fingers were still hooked in my sweater. Are you warm now? He nodded. I released him carefully into Aijun's arms. Only after the child was secure did I let Tae-sung place the coat around my shoulders. It was heavy, lined in something soft, still carrying the outside cold rather than any fantasy warmth. It covered me from neck to calves. The donor group stared as if a law of social order had been misfiled. Tae-sung turned to them. You will apologize. The woman blinked. Director Han, I don't think... That was evident earlier. Her face reddened. The man beside her bowed stiffly toward me. We apologize. I wanted to be graceful. I wanted to be the kind of person who could accept an apology like clean water. Instead, I said, For which part? The man's jaw flexed. Tae-sung's mouth moved almost imperceptibly. It was not a smile, but it suggested one had been considered and rejected for security reasons. For mocking you, the woman said, each syllable dragged from a locked drawer, and for speaking cruelly after you helped the child. Accepted, I said, because Jun was watching. Tae-sung gestured to the donation box. Where does this go? Subway entrance 3. SEO Jin. The third brother lifted the box as if it weighed nothing. I'm on community service now? You are holding coats. A humbling transformation. I should have been afraid. A sensible person would have been afraid from the first black car. I was, in a practical way. The Han family did not become rich because they enjoyed being contradicted by underpaid Omegas on icy sidewalks. But my knee hurt. My pay envelope was short, and Tae-sung's coat was the warmest thing I had worn in years. Fear had to wait in line. At the subway entrance, Jun finally let go of my sleeve after I promised to keep the drawing he intended to send. Tae-sung insisted on a clinic of my choosing, waited outside the exam room, paid only after placing the receipt in my hand, and accepted my refusal of anything heavier than that. The doctor cleaned my knee, wrapped it, and told me to rest as if rest were a cabinet I could open. Tae-sung drove me back without asking to come upstairs. The car pulled away only after I unlocked the building door. I climbed 4 flights to my rooftop room, limping and damp, and found Aunt Mi-suk waiting outside with 2 men in wool coats. Some days had no respect for pacing. Aunt Mi-suk looked from my bandaged knee to my wet shoes and clicked her tongue. You always make yourself look pitiful, Yunjo. And you always arrive when there's no food to offer. Her smile sharpened. She was my father's younger sister, an Omega who had survived by attaching herself to stronger people and calling the attachment family duty. These gentlemen need to discuss your father's settlement. One of the men opened a folder. A gold watch. I recognized him from Harin's description. His eyes flicked over me, pausing at my cheap sweater, my limp, my cracked hands. Lee Yun-jo. Your father listed you as secondary guarantor on a private loan. My father forged my signature before. Send it to court. He smiled as if I had made a child's joke. Court is slow, interest is quick. My patience is also not famous. Aunt Mi-suk sighed. Why provoke them? Your sister's salon is at risk. You could settle quietly if you stopped being proud. With what money? The basil plant? Goldwatch stepped closer. You seem to have made a powerful acquaintance today. I went still. His smile widened. A poor Omega receives the Alpha King's coat in public. People talk. Maybe you can ask your new patron for help. The word patron landed like something dirty thrown against a wall. My knee throbbed beneath the bandage. I thought of Tae-sung's coat held open without force, the receipt placed in my hand, the apology demanded from people who had not expected to be answerable. Then I thought of how quickly the world could turn any gesture toward an Omega into ownership. Leave, I said. Goldwatch tilted his head. We'll return, with witnesses. Bring a handwriting expert. Aunt Mi-suk's face tightened. You think sarcasm protects you? No, but it keeps me entertained while I'm being threatened. They left after one final warning about deadlines and shame. I locked the door, sat on the floor because the chair felt too far away, and opened Harin's photos. There were loan forms, signatures that resembled ours if viewed by someone with poor eyesight or deliberate malice, and a repayment notice with a company seal I did not recognize. My father had been many things, but neat was not one of them. These documents were too clean. Min was a Beta jewelry apprentice with blue hair when his boss allowed it, and black hair when rent demanded obedience. We had met at a night class for small business bookkeeping, both of us hoping math would become less rude with professional instruction. It had not, but friendship had survived. He had his own problems, an apprenticeship contract that paid less than minimum wage, and a mother who wanted him to marry a dentist from Suwon. Still, he had a way of worrying about me, as if he could invoice fear and make it useful. I called him after the men left because panic becomes less convincing when someone familiar can insult it. I told him about Goldwatch, Aunt Mi-suk, and the company seal on the notice. I told him about Goldwatch. His teasing vanished. Send me the company name. Why? My cousin works at a legal aid office, and before you refuse, receiving a phone number is not dependence. It is using society for once. I hate when you sound mature. It happens twice a year. Respect the season. In the morning, June's drawing arrived at the shelter by courier. It showed a yellow-hatted child, a black car, 3 tall stick figures, and a smaller figure wrapped in a coat large enough to resemble a tent. Above us, in careful, crooked letters, he had written, "Thank you for catching me." I pinned it above my sewing table, where everyone could see it, because children deserve to have gratitude displayed where adults displayed donor plaques. The trouble began at noon when 2 reporters came to the shelter. They did not introduce themselves as reporters. They wore padded jackets and carried donated scarves, asking soft questions about community work. One of them pointed to June's drawing. Cute, is that the Omega from the video? Director Park's expression cooled. What video? The woman showed us her phone. Someone had filmed the sidewalk scene from the hotel entrance. The clip had already spread across gossip accounts. Poor Omega mocked by donors. Alpha King places coat on his shoulders. The captions were worse than the video. Some praised Tae-sung for gallantry. Some accused me of staging a rescue for compensation. Others speculated about whether the Han heir had chosen an Omega in front of his own family's charity guests. My face was visible. My name was not yet. My first thought was not fear for myself. It was Harin's salon, my rooftop address, Goldwatch smiling because the world had offered him a larger lever. Director Park ushered the reporters out with language so polite it should have been classified as a weapon. I stood behind the sewing table, staring at June's drawing. Min arrived 20 minutes later, breathless and furious. "Do not read comments," he said. "I already read 4. "Why would you do that?" "Because humans enjoy touching bruises." His cousin from legal aid, Attorney Kwon, called while Min was still scolding me. She had received the file from Tae-sung's office. Her voice was brisk. "Mr. Lee, the loan papers involving you and your sister show signs of fabrication, but Baekjin Credit has submitted similar documents in civil claims before. They move quickly. You need an injunction if they attempt seizure." "Can legal aid handle it?" "We can start, but there's another issue. The video has increased their incentive. If they believe you have access to the Han family, they may pressure you harder or sell your information." Min mouthed a curse. Attorney Kwon continued. Director Han's legal office offered to cover a private forensic review anonymously through our foundation. I refused until I spoke with you. By evening, my name appeared online. Needle After Rain received 73 messages in 2 hours. Some were kind, some asked if I had seduced an alpha by falling attractively in slush, which suggested an alarming misunderstanding of both gravity and romance. 3 orders were real, 5 were threats. 1 attached a photo of my building entrance. I packed a bag with documents, medicine, 2 sweaters, my mother's old thimble, and the basil mug wrapped in a towel because fear makes people sentimental about ridiculous things. I was deciding whether to sleep at Min's when a knock came at my door. I looked through the peephole. Han Tai-sung stood in the hallway alone, holding my patched black coat over one arm. I opened the door with the chain on. "How did you find my address?" "Baekjin found it first." "That is not an answer." "It is the reason I am here." "The answer is that my security team traced the source of the posted photograph." "You could have called?" "I did. I checked my phone. 6 missed calls from an unknown number because I had turned it silent to stop strangers from telling me what kind of Omega they believed I was." He looked at the chain, then at my packed bag visible behind me. "Good. You were leaving. Do you always approve people's survival plans without being invited?" "When they are correct." I almost shut the door. Instead, I said, "What do you want?" "To offer transport to a safe place of your choosing. Not mine unless you request it. Your friend Ju Min's workshop has already been photographed by 2 men. Your sister's salon is being watched. The shelter director has police contacts, but the officer who arrived this afternoon has accepted Baekjin money before." My fingers tightened on the door edge. "And I'm supposed to trust that you know all of this for innocent reasons?" "No." That stopped me. Taesung's face remained unreadable, but his eyes were tired at the edges. "You should not trust me blindly. You should verify what I say. Call Attorney Kwon. Call your sister. Call Director Park. Then decide." "What happens if I decide not to go with you?" 2 guards remain outside your building without approaching you. Their names and ID numbers will be sent to Attorney Kwon. If you dislike that, they leave." "Why?" His gaze moved past me to the little room, the patched curtains, the sewing machine, the basil mug sticking out of my bag. "Because a child from my family ran into the road, you saved him, and my family's public attention turned your private crisis into a weapon." "That sounds like guilt." "It is responsibility. Rich people must have a dictionary where all the frightening words are replaced with polished ones." "Likely." I hated that he answered dryly instead of defending himself. It made him harder to argue with. I called Attorney Kwon. She confirmed the guard IDs, the Baekjin surveillance, and the fact that Taesung's team had offered transport without requiring me to sign anything. I called Harin. She whispered from the back room of her salon that a man had been sitting across the street for an hour. I called Min, who said, "I love you, but my apartment door is made of plywood and optimism." I removed the chain. Taesung's gaze dropped to my bag. "May I carry it?" "No." "Good. Good. You should keep your documents on you." He took me to a serviced apartment near the river, not to his house. The address went to Attorney Kwon before I stepped inside. The guards stayed in the lobby. The key cards went into my hand. Inside were rice, tea, medicine, and annoyingly, a sewing kit. When I told him practical help could still be intrusive, he put the kit in a cabinet and apologized without asking to be congratulated for it. The next morning, I woke to 14 missed messages and a news article suggesting that the Han family had found its future Omega consort in a charity incident. I read the headline twice, then put my face in my hands and laughed once, sharply. Consort. As if I had been discovered under a cabbage leaf and presented to the court. Attorney Kwon called before I finished tea. "Mr. Lee, Baekjin filed a preliminary asset claim against your sister's salon at 850. My amusement vanished. "Can they do that?" "They can file, we can challenge. But there's more. A statement from the hotel donor group claims you provoked the confrontation for money and used the Han child for attention. That is absurd. Yes, absurd can still cause damage. At 10, Tae-sung arrived with Ai-jun, the legal brother, and a woman introduced as Chae Un-sil, head counsel for Hanyul Group. I had insisted Attorney Kwon join by video before discussing anything. Tae-sung agreed without visible annoyance. Ijun set a slim folder on the table. Baekjin is not independent. It belongs to a shell network controlled by Han Seok-gi, our uncle. I looked at Tae-sung. Your family? Yes. The word weighed more than any explanation. Chae Yun-sil continued. Han Seok-gi is challenging Director Han's succession. He has used creditor pressure before to compromise witnesses, employees, small vendors, relatives of board members. Your situation became useful to him after the video. Because people think I'm connected to Tae-sung. Because the public thinks Director Han protected you, Ai-jun corrected. In our family, public perception can become internal evidence. Some elders already prefer you over the alliance candidate Seok-gi supports. You appear poor, wronged, grateful, and harmless. I stared at him. I am not grateful on command, and harmless depends on the scissors available. Ai-jun smiled. That may improve your appeal. Tae-sung did not smile. Ai-jun. What? I'm telling him the truth. Attorney Kwon's voice came through the laptop. What are you proposing? The room changed. I felt it before anyone spoke. Tae-sung stood near the window, hands at his sides, face angled toward the gray river beyond the glass. He looked like a man about to step into water he knew was cold. Chae Yun-sil said, "A public contractual marriage." I laughed. No one else did. "No," I said. Tae-sung turned from the window. "You have not heard the terms." I heard the noun. Then refuse after the terms. I don't need to inspect a cage to identify bars. Something moved in his expression, so small I might have missed it if I had not spent years reading customers who did not want to admit a garment could not be saved. Fair. Ai-jun leaned back. Hyung, this is going well. Tae-sung ignored him. Seok-gi wants to turn you into evidence that I am reckless, exploitable, or privately compromised. He also wants your family debt alive. If you enter a registered marriage with me for 6 months, under independent legal terms, your debts can be challenged under Hanyul protection without appearing as bribery. Your sister receives a security injunction through counsel. Your mother's remaining hospital debt can be placed in escrow, not gifted. Your workplace and business account receive legal defense against defamation. In return, I satisfy a succession condition requiring a spouse approved before the council vote. It prevents Seok-gi from forcing an alliance marriage through the elders. My mother is dead, I said. The room went still. Oh, a flicker crossed Tae-sung's eyes. He looked at the folder in Ai-jun's hand. The file said ongoing care debt. Funeral debt, I said. She died last year. The hospital sold part of the account. My father borrowed against the rest before he disappeared. Tae-sung's face did not change much, but Ijun closed the folder slowly, and Chae Yun-sil lowered her gaze to her notes. Tae-sung said, I apologize. That should have been verified before it was spoken aloud. You people gather everything except the part that hurts. The words came out sharper than planned. Nobody corrected me. Attorney Kwon cleared her throat. Mr. Lee, a marriage contract is extreme, but a public legal tie could limit Baekjin's ability to target you, only if terms are strict. I stood and went to the cabinet, not because I needed anything, but because sitting made me feel surrounded. The sewing kit stared at me from the shelf where Tae-sung had put it away. What does public mean? One appearance before the council, Chai said. One registered civil marriage, limited press statement, No personal interviews without consent. Separate bedrooms, separate finances, 6-month term, dissolution clause once succession stabilizes and debt claims are cleared. Living arrangements? Taesung answered. A suite at my residence if necessary, or this apartment. Your choice. Work? You keep it. Friends? No restrictions. Family? Protected, not managed. I want that written. It will be. I want Attorney Kwon to review everything. Of course. I want my own bank account untouched, my business account untouched, and a clause that says no physical contact for public performance without asking first. Taesung's gaze lifted to mine. Yes. No attending events in clothes I can't move in. Ai-jun looked delighted. Chai took notes as if this was normal. No guards inside my room, no tracking my phone, no reading messages, no speaking to my sister without my permission. Yes. If you lie, if you use Harin to pressure me, if you turn pity into a leash, I walk. Taesung was quiet long enough for the heater to click on. If I do any of those, you should do more than walk. You should take every protection in the agreement and leave me with the consequences. I did not know what to do with that answer. Men who wanted power usually disliked discussing ways to punish themselves. Attorney Kwon said, I will need 2 days to review. The council deadline is tomorrow night, Che said. Then your family's crisis has poor manners. I nearly smiled. Attorney Kwon might have been my favorite person in the room. Taesung looked at me. You can refuse. The guards remain until the immediate threat is addressed. The legal support already offered remains through Attorney Kwon. I will not withdraw it. There it was, the hinge on which everything turned. I had expected pressure wrapped in courtesy. Instead, he offered me the exit before I asked. Why? I said. Because if protection disappears when you refuse me, it was never protection. No one spoke after that. Not Ai-jun, not Che, not Attorney Kwon. Outside the window, the river moved under a skin of winter light. I thought of Harin locking her salon door, Min joking because fear embarrassed him, Director Park guarding the shelter with polite fury, my mother's thimble in my bag, the basil plant wrapped like a sacred object. I thought of my father's signature pretending to be ours. I thought of Han Tae-sung's coat hovering behind my shoulders, waiting for permission. I'll read the terms, I said. That is not acceptance. I understand. You look like you do, which is suspicious. Ai-jun laughed. Taesung's mouth almost moved again. I will try to appear less competent. Don't overdo it. I'm already frightened. By noon the next day, Attorney Kwon had cut the draft open and stitched it back into something I could survive. The marriage would last 6 months unless ended earlier for coercion, surveillance, violence, or any use of my family as leverage. I kept my work, income, phone, room lock, friendships, and the right to refuse public touch. Taesung signed the revisions before the civil registration, and I signed only after reading every page twice. Harin cried in the lobby and called the government office the least romantic place she had ever seen, which made it feel almost honest. The council appearance took place that night at the Han residence in Seongbuk-dong, a house too large to be called a house without insulting smaller buildings. Stone walls, old pines, discreet cameras, men in dark coats who did not fidget. Inside, the floors shone. The air held a faint trace of polished wood and winter flowers, and every person who turned toward me seemed to calculate my value before my name reached them. Taesung walked beside me, not ahead. Before the main hall doors, he paused. They will test you. I assumed they weren't gathering to celebrate my tailoring. Some will mention poverty. I've met poverty. Their description will lack detail. some will imply you trapped me. I'll survive the promotion from pitiful to seductive." His gaze rested on my face. "You do not have to answer every insult." "No, but I like to choose which ones leave with bruises." For the first time, Taesung's near smile appeared fully enough to count. It was brief, controlled, and gone before the doors opened. The council hall held 14 elders, several cousins, 3 lawyers, and Han Seok-gi. I recognized him before introductions. He had the smooth face of a man who believed kindness was a weakness he had outsourced. His suit was dark green, his hair silver at the temples, his hands folded over a cane he did not need. Beside him sat an Omega in pearl gray, elegant and composed, the alliance candidate perhaps, though his eyes looked less cruel than tired. Seok-gi's gaze slid over me. "This is the Coat Omega." I bowed with the minimum respect required to avoid being dragged into etiquette court. "Lee Yun-jo." "Your sudden marriage has moved many hearts online. I hear the internet is easily moved." A few elders shifted. Aijun coughed into his hand behind me. Taesung remained still. Seok-gi smiled. "And what moved yours? Gratitude? Ambition? Fear?" The civil office had limited parking, mostly urgency. This time Seo-jin made a sound that might have been a strangled laugh. Taesung did not turn, but I saw his hand relax at his side. The questions continued for an hour. They asked about my family debt, my work, my connection to the shelter, my mother, my father's disappearance. Attorney Kwan had prepared me for humiliation disguised as due diligence. I answered what was relevant and refused what was not. When one elder asked whether an Omega from my background could understand the responsibilities of standing beside the Han heir, I looked at the cuff of his handmade coat and saw a loose thread near the button. "Responsibility is not difficult to recognize," I said. "It usually shows where things are weakest and waits to see who repairs them." His mouth closed. Then the Omega in gray spoke. "And if you are only being used as a shield?" His voice was quiet. The room listened differently. Taesung had told me nothing about him, which meant either he was unimportant or too important to reduce. I chose honesty. "Then I intend to remain a shield with legal counsel, an income, and an exit clause." His eyes sharpened, and for a moment something like approval passed through them. Seok-gi tapped his cane once. "Bold. Did Director Han teach you that?" "No, poverty did. Director Han's lawyers improved the formatting." A murmur moved through the room. Taesung stepped forward then, his voice level. "The marriage satisfies the succession condition. The contract terms have been submitted. The vote proceeds." Seok-gi's smile thinned. "A spouse collected from the street may satisfy paperwork. It does not satisfy blood." Taesung's face changed so little that others might have missed it. I did not. His jaw set, not with anger alone, but with old exhaustion. "Be careful, uncle." "Or what? You'll put your coat over another stray and call it lineage?" The hall went very quiet. I felt Taesung's restraint gather like a hand closing around broken glass. I could have let him answer. A strategic spouse might have stayed silent, allowing the alpha to defend his honor. But I had not entered this arrangement to become furniture with a pulse. I took one step forward. Director Han put his coat on my shoulders because I was cold after saving a child from the road. You watched the same video and saw bloodline politics. That says less about my place on the street than yours in this room. Seok-gi's eyes hardened. "You speak above yourself." "I'm short. I often have to." No one laughed this time. The insult had landed too precisely. Taesung looked at me then, and the room briefly fell away. His expression did not soften exactly. It sharpened around recognition. He had expected endurance, perhaps cleverness. He had not expected me to defend the act he had tried to keep from becoming a weapon. The vote passed by 2 margins. Tae-sung retained interim succession authority. Seok-gi lost the alliance marriage leverage. I left the hall with my spine straight and my palms damp. During the first days of the marriage, life divided itself into absurd and ordinary pieces. In the morning, I still went to the shelter, now accompanied by a security guard named Mr. Nam, who looked embarrassed by my folding cart. I told him he could help carry boxes if he intended to loom. He did, silently, and by the 3rd day, Director Park had him fixing shelves. At night, I returned to the Han residence, reviewed legal updates with Attorney Kwon, and ate dinner in rooms where every bowl seemed chosen by someone with strong opinions about ceramic restraint. Tae-sung did not hover. That unsettled me more than hovering would have. He sent schedules through Ms. Gong, asked before arranging any public appearance, and knocked only once at my study door during the first week. I opened it with a seam ripper in hand. This is not a weapon unless necessary. His gaze flicked to the tool. Noted. What do you need? He held a garment bag. The council requires a charity reception tomorrow. You approved attendance. The stylist sent options. Ms. Gong said you rejected all jackets with decorative suffering. Accurate summary. He unzipped the bag to reveal a simple, dark wool coat. Clean lines, deep pockets, no shine, no theatrical lapels. On the cuff, almost invisible, was a patch of navy fabric stitched in a pattern I recognized. I touched it before I remembered not to. This matches the repair I made on the donation coat. Jun drew it. Seo-jin turned it into a reference. A tailor made the coat. The patch can be removed if you dislike it. I looked at him. He stood very still, as if preparing for refusal. Why? The video made my coat the story. I thought you might prefer one that remembers your work instead. That was the first thing he did that I could not file under strategy, guilt, or convenience. A public spouse needed clothing, yes. A tailored coat served appearances, yes. But the hidden patch, the deep pockets, the absence of decorative straps, that required attention he did not need to spend. It's good, I said, his shoulders lowered by a fraction. Good. Don't look relieved. It'll become a habit. I will monitor it. The reception was held at a private museum where sculptures stood under dramatic lighting and donors praised themselves beside wine they would not finish. I wore the dark coat. Tae-sung walked at my side. Cameras waited outside, their flashes turning the entrance white in bursts. Before we stepped from the car, he turned to me. May I place my hand at your back for the entrance? I had negotiated the clause. Hearing it used in public made my throat tighten. Yes, upper back. No guiding me like luggage. His hand settled exactly where permitted, light enough that I could move away. The cameras shouted his name, then mine once someone confirmed it. Lee Yun-jo, look here. Mr. Lee, are you truly married? Director Han, is this a love match? I kept my face neutral because any expression becomes public property once a lens finds it. Inside, Seok-gi's allies circled with smiles. One cousin complimented my coat while looking at the fabric as if calculating its cost. Another asked whether I missed simpler surroundings. I told him heated floors had softened my revolutionary spirit, but I remained vigilant. Seo-jin choked on champagne. The reception turned when a reporter asked Tae-sung whether marrying a poor Omega had been an act of rebellion against bloodline expectations. Tae-sung looked at the reporter. My husband's financial background is not a defect to be weighed against his character. The room quieted. He had said husband before in legal contexts. Hearing it in that tone, neither performative nor soft, struck differently. He did not look at me after speaking. He did not check whether I was grateful. He simply moved the conversation forward, leaving the sentence behind like a coat over a chair. I told myself the reaction in my chest was embarrassment. Then I told myself to stop lying with such poor craftsmanship. That evening I returned to the Han residence and found Tai Sung in the courtyard, standing under a pine while a man I did not know shouted at him. "You humiliate the family for a charity stray," the man said. "Then you let your Omega's sister provoke Seokgi's creditor network?" Tai Sung's face was calm. Too calm. "Do not refer to my spouse that way." "Spouse? A contract signature with cold hands. You think elders respect this? You think the old crews will follow an heir who lets a poor Omega dictate security terms?" I should have walked away. Eavesdropping was rude, but the courtyard path curved behind a stone lantern, and my feet stopped before my ethics caught up. The man continued, lower now. "Your father would have corrected him." Tai Sung's hand moved, not toward the man, toward his own sleeve, where he pressed thumb and forefinger together once, hard. "My father corrected many things that were not broken." The man paled. "Director, leave." No raised voice. The man bowed and left with the rigid steps of someone spared more than dismissed. I remained behind the lantern, breath held. Tai Sung stood alone beneath the pine. For the first time since I met him, he looked less like a man built from discipline and more like someone who had survived being shaped by hands that called damage instruction. He took a small object from his coat pocket, a child's button, dark horn, cracked at one edge. He held it in his palm for a few seconds, then closed his fist. I stepped back, but gravel betrayed me. His head turned. "Yun-jo." I wasn't spying. No? I was accidentally gathering context. He looked at me for a long moment, then placed the button back in his pocket. "Context should wear warmer shoes." That almost made me smile. I approached slowly, giving him the same visible option he had given me with the coat. Who was that? A cousin loyal to my uncle. And the button? His gaze went to the pine branches. Jun's father's coat, my older cousin. He died 3 years ago. "I'm sorry." He accepted the words with a small nod, neither deflecting nor performing grief. Jun ran that day because he saw a man from Seokgi's side. He remembered more than we thought. At the hotel? Yes. The man who frightened him was not a stranger. That is why he crossed the road. The cold seemed to press closer. "Your uncle used a child?" He would say he allowed circumstances to apply pressure. "Your family has disgusting vocabulary." Yes. What happened to Jun's father? Tai Sung's face became unreadable again, but now I understood the effort inside it. He opposed Seokgi's private lending network. A driving accident followed. Nothing could be proven. The button in his pocket had a weight now, though I could not see it. "And you kept that?" Jun gave it to me at the funeral. He said broken things should go to people who knew how to keep them. The sentence struck so specifically that I had to look away. My work table at the shelter, Jun's drawing, the coat patch, my own life arranged around repair because replacement had always been too expensive. Suddenly they formed a line between us I had not meant to trace. "That is why you notice the mending," I said. He did not answer immediately. "I notice what people choose to repair." The emotional turn did not arrive with confession. It arrived in the cold courtyard, in the space between a dead cousin's button and an alpha who had learned to fold grief into stillness so no one could grab it. I did not want to feel closer to him because of pain. Pain was not romance, but understanding changes the shape of distance. After that night, Tai Sung was no longer only the man whose family endangered mine. He was also the boy someone had tried to correct into a weapon, the uncle who kept a cracked button because a child trusted him with broken things. The lawsuit moved faster than expected. Attorney Kwan and Chai uncovered that Baekjin's documents had been notarized by a clerk connected to Seokgi's shell companies. Harin's salon received a temporary protection order. My father's supposed guarantee forms went to forensic review. The hotel donors issued a revised apology after footage surfaced from another angle, showing Jun stepping into traffic before I moved. Public opinion turned with its usual shallow violence. I was no longer a scheming Omega. I was brave, humble, beautiful, tragic, inspiring. None of these strangers had cared about my name before the coat. I preferred being ignored. The first time Tae-sung touched me without cameras, I asked for it. We were in the archive room of the Han residence, searching for old property ledgers connected to Seokgi's lending network. The room was narrow, windowless, lined with cabinets that smelled of dust and metal. I had insisted on helping because textile restoration had made me good with old paper, and because sitting idle while others solved my life made my skin itch. Tae-sung watched me handle a brittle ledger with a brush and cotton gloves. "You have done this before," he said. "Old fabric, old paper, old lies, similar patience." A page tore at the edge despite my care. I cursed softly. Tae-sung moved closer, then stopped. "May I?" I handed him the small weight, expecting him to hold the page flat. Instead, his fingers brushed mine through the gloves, careful and brief. The contact was nothing. It should have been nothing. My awareness of him had been built from non-events. A hand at my back after permission, a coat held open, distance respected, tea left untouched, jokes delivered like smuggled contraband. I looked at his hand. "You can stand closer." He did not move immediately. "For the ledger?" "For me." The air changed. He stepped beside me, close enough that our sleeves touched. His body was warm in the chill archive room, but he made no further move. I appreciated that more than I wanted to admit. "You are certain?" he asked. "I'm certain about standing. Don't get ambitious. Standing is within my current skill range." We worked that way for 20 minutes, shoulder to shoulder, finding names, dates, repayment codes. Then I saw my father's name in a column beside an amount larger than any debt notice we had received. Below it was a notation: "Asset pressure through family Omega." My stomach turned. Tae-sung read it too. His stillness sharpened. "That was before the video," I said. "Yes." "Seokgi already had us." His voice lowered. "Yes." I gripped the table edge. "So the coat didn't create the danger." "It exposed a line already tied around you." A bitter laugh scraped my throat. "Comforting." No. He was right, or it was not. It meant my father's debts, Harin's salon, my work at the shelter, even Aunt Mi-suk's sudden visits were part of a network that had marked us before I knew the Han family existed. Poverty had made us available. The video had only made us visible. I pulled off the cotton gloves because my hands felt trapped. Tae-sung turned toward me, not touching. "Yeonjo." "I hate this," I said. "I hate that the worst thing in my life keeps becoming useful to someone else." "I know." "No, you don't." He accepted the correction. "I know aversion." That stopped the anger from finding an easy target. I looked at him. "Your version has better furniture." "Yes." "And more dead relatives." His eyes did not move. "Yes." There was no winning against that kind of honesty. I reached out and took his sleeve, just the fabric near his wrist. He looked down at my hand as if it was more significant than any council vote. Maybe it was, in that room. "I'm not accepting comfort," I said. "Then what are you accepting?" "Stability, temporarily." His mouth softened. "Understood." We stood there until my breathing steadied. He did not turn it into a confession. He did not lift my hand or tell me I was brave. He stayed. The ledger changed the case. Che used it to connect Baekjin to Seokgi's pressure strategy. Attorney Kwon filed motions. The labor office accepted Min's complaint. Harin's salon started receiving clients who came partly from curiosity and stayed because my sister was excellent with hair and ruthless with scalp massage. Life did not become easy. It became less cornered. Then Seokgi offered a settlement. Baekjin would withdraw every claim against my family, compensate Harin, and erase the forged papers if I dissolved the marriage immediately, signed a statement calling it emotional confusion, and promised never to speak about Han family matters again. It would give me the safety I had entered the agreement to obtain, but it would also return Tae-sung to Seokgi's alliance plans and turn my own voice into another document written by someone else. Harin wanted to storm our aunt's apartment. Min offered to design earrings sharp enough for prison. Attorney Kwon advised defamation action. Tae-sung said very little, which meant he was angrier than everyone. I made the active decision at 3 in the morning, sitting in the Han kitchen with Ms. Gong's barley tea and my mother's thimble beside the cup. I was tired of being explained by people who found my poverty useful, so I recorded a statement. Not polished, not tragic. I sat at the kitchen table in an old sweater and spoke plainly. I said my father's debts were under legal review for forgery. I said Baekjin had targeted my sister before the charity incident. I said Han Tae-sung and I had entered a legal contract during a coercion attempt with independent counsel, protections, boundaries, and an exit clause. I said saving a child did not make me pure, marrying a powerful alpha did not make me owned, and being poor did not make every choice a sale. I did not mention love. I did not defend Tae-sung beyond the facts. I ended by saying my work was repair, and repair required naming damage honestly before anyone touched the needle. I sent it to Attorney Kwon, not Tae-sung. By morning, it was released with supporting documents, forged signatures, Baekjin shell links, hotel footage, court filings, the relevant clauses of the marriage agreement with private details redacted. Che coordinated corporate response. Rayon publicly confirmed that no alliance engagement had existed with his consent, and that coercive family negotiations should not be mistaken for tradition. Min posted photos of repaired jewelry under his own brand and somehow turned labor theft into a thread about artisanship that gained more attention than some politicians. Director Park issued a shelter statement banning exploitation of beneficiaries and volunteers by media. Harin gave no public statement. Instead, she opened the salon on time and offered discounted haircuts to local seniors, which was exactly her kind of defiance. The council vote convened under public scrutiny. Seokgi arrived smiling, but the smile had lost architecture. I attended because I chose to, wearing the dark coat with the hidden patch. Before the hall doors opened, Tae-sung stopped beside me. "You can still leave," he said. "I know. I am not asking you to stand in there." "I know that too." His eyes searched my face. "Then why?" "Because your uncle keeps speaking as if people like me only appear when summoned. I want to ruin that rhythm." He nodded once. "May I stand with you?" The question undid me more than any declaration could have. Not may I hold you, guide you, present you. May I stand with you? As if my presence was ground, he requested permission to share. "Yes," I said, "but if your uncle insults my coat, I get first response." "Agreed." Inside, Seokgi tried courtesy first. He spoke of stability, tradition, bloodline continuity, media storms. He expressed sympathy for my family's confusion. Then, Chai presented documents. Aijun followed with legal exposure. Seo-jin displayed timelines of shell companies with the cheerful brutality of a man who enjoyed clean graphics. Rayon's family withdrew support from Seokgi's alliance bloc. Two elders flipped, One abstained. The old man with the loose thread on his cuff voted for Tae-sung while refusing to look impressed. Seok-gi's final move was aimed at me. You think this family will keep applauding you once your usefulness ends? I stood before Tae-sung could move. No, I think applause is unreliable. That is why I asked for documents. A few elders shifted, remembering the contract clauses now publicly known. Seok-gi's eyes narrowed. And when Director Han discards you? I looked at Tae-sung then. He did not rescue me from the question. He let me answer because answerable dignity was what I had demanded from the beginning. Then I leave with my work, my bank account, my family protected by court order, my friend's business growing, and enough experience to recognize men like you faster next time. The vote passed by 5. Han Tae-sung became formal head of Hanyul Group and the family organization that no document named plainly. Seok-gi was removed from internal authority pending legal review. No one shouted, no one drew weapons. Men who had once bowed to him simply stopped looking in his direction. It was the coldest punishment I had ever seen. Afterward, in the empty map room, Tae-sung dissolved the marriage before asking me to stay. He placed the revised documents on the table between us. Attorney Kwon and Chai had prepared them after my public statement. The emergency contract would end in 30 days. All legal protections for my family remained through separate court and escrow structures. My housing support converted into a business grant administered by the Shelter Foundation, available whether or not I remained connected to him. Harin's settlement stood independently. My name was removed from Hanyul internal succession documents. The marriage, once dissolved, could be replaced by nothing at all. I read every page. Tae-sung waited. You signed your side already, I said. Yes. You could have waited. That would make the exit another negotiation. I looked at the signature. His handwriting was controlled, dark, slightly slanted. And after 30 days? After 30 days, you decide where to live, where to work, whether to see me, whether to block my number, whether to return the coat, whether to keep it. He paused. The coat was made for you. Keeping it is not acceptance of me. I touched the cuff patch. You rehearsed that. I wrote notes. That startled a laugh out of me. The Alpha King writes notes for emotional conversations. The Alpha King is not naturally gifted. Clearly, he looked at me, and the restrained humor faded into something quieter. I would like to know you without emergency terms. Slowly, with your lawyer bored and your sister unimpressed. Harin will never be unimpressed. She has strong opinions about everyone's hair. I accept the risk. What if I need time? I will wait without making waiting into pressure. What if I say no? His throat moved once. Then I will continue ensuring the protections remain separate, and I will send Jun's drawings through the shelter if you permit. There it was again. Dislike the outcome. Honor it. I had thought freedom would feel like running. Instead, it felt like sitting at a table with signed papers and realizing no one had locked the door. I did not answer that day. For 30 days, I lived mostly at the serviced apartment, partly at my rooftop room while repairs were made, and occasionally at the Han residence when public schedules required it. The difference was enormous because the requirement was ending. I could feel it in my body. I slept better. I argued more. I reopened Needle After Rain properly with Min as a partner for small textile and metal restoration commissions. We found a basement studio with bad pipes and beautiful light. The Shelter Foundation grant covered deposit and equipment under terms so transparent, even Attorney Kwon smiled. Harin's salon recovered. Salon. She changed the peach curtains to deep green and pretended it had nothing to do with my insults. Min won partial back pay and launched his first independent collection, titled Filing Cabinet Kimchi, because artists should not be allowed to name things while bitter. Ryan sent his grandmother's cardigan again, this time with a handwritten note saying he had secured a residency transfer and a temporary apartment away from his family. Jun visited the shelter with Seo-jin and donated mittens he had chosen himself, each pair inspected with the seriousness of a small emperor. Tae-sung and I learned ordinary contact like cautious apprentices. We had tea at a public cafe with Mr. Nam pretending not to guard us from across the street. Tae-sung asked before taking the seat beside me instead of across. I said yes, then spilled tea on the table, because being free did not make me elegant. He handed me napkins without comment. We walked through a fabric market where vendors tried to overcharge him on principle, and I bargained so fiercely one woman gave me extra lining for saving rich men from themselves. He came to the studio opening and stood in the back, while Director Park cried over the industrial sewing machine. When my rooftop landlord attempted to raise rent after seeing my name online, Tae-sung did not intervene. Attorney Kwan sent a letter, and I moved out anyway because the ceiling had rattled for the last time. The marriage dissolved on a rainy Thursday. The civil office smelled exactly the same. This time, no borrowed prosecutor's suit. I wore my own dark coat. Tae-sung wore gray. The clerk processed the papers with bored efficiency, severing a legal bond that had changed the shape of all our lives without ever pretending to be simple. Outside, under the awning, Tae-sung looked at the rain. "Are you relieved?" "Yes." His face did not fall. He had prepared for honesty, prepared for. "I'm also sad," I said. That did affect him. His gaze returned to me, careful, as if hope was something that might startle if approached too quickly. I continued before courage could leak out through my shoes. "I don't want to be married to an emergency. I don't want to live in your house because men with folders made my life unsafe. I don't want protection to be the price of affection." I took a breath. "I do want dinner next week, at a place where no one has a succession vote. You can choose, but if there are more than 3 forks, I'm leaving." Tae-sung was silent long enough that rain filled the space between us. Then he said, "There is a noodle place near the river. 1 fork, chopsticks optional." That sounded suspiciously prepared. I wrote notes. I laughed, and this time he smiled fully. It changed his face less than people might imagine, but more than enough for me. Our first real date happened 6 days later. The noodle place had fogged windows, plastic stools, and a television showing baseball highlights no one watched. Tae-sung arrived without guards inside, though I knew they were nearby because he was still himself, and the world had not become harmless for our convenience. I arrived from the studio with thread on my sleeve. He noticed and did not remove it for me. We talked about Jun's new fear of crosswalks, Harin's green curtains, Min's terrible collection names, Ms. Gong's plan to reorganize the Han laundry room like a military campaign. Tae-sung told me his cousin's name, Han Do-yoon. Jun's father. He said it once clearly, as if returning the name to air. I told him my mother used to mend socks while watching courtroom dramas and predict the murderer before the first advertisement. We did not turn grief into intimacy. We let it sit at the table, acknowledged and unexploited. After dinner, rain had stopped. The river path shone under streetlights. We walked with space between us until my hand brushed his by accident. He stopped. "May I hold your hand?" he asked. I looked at his hand, then at the river, then at the man who had once put a coat on my shoulders in front of people who thought warmth could only move downward. He had not saved me into silence. He had not loved me into debt. He had made mistakes, corrected them when named, signed away leverage before asking for tenderness, and learned to stand beside me without turning beside into above. "Yes," I said, But don't look victorious. His fingers closed around mine, warm and steady. I look neutral. You look like a man trying not to look victorious. I will practice. Add it to your notes. I have. We took the long way back. At the studio, the sign for Needle After Rain had been installed that afternoon, black letters on pale wood, a small stitched line carved beneath the name. Min hated that the sign was tasteful because he preferred drama. I unlocked the door and let Tae-sung step inside after me. The room smelled of new paint, machine oil, metal polish, and old fabric waiting for another chance. My mother's thimble sat on the front counter under a glass dome Min had found at a flea market. The basil plant stood near the window, alive out of spite. Tae-sung looked around without speaking. His gaze paused on the industrial machine, the jewelry bench, the rack of damaged coats, the cardboard box labeled Future Miracles in Min's handwriting. "This suits you," he said. "It suits who I'm becoming." "Yes." I took off my coat and hung it by the door. The hidden navy patch on the cuff caught the light. Tae-sung's eyes moved to it, then away, giving even that small symbol room to belong to me first. On the work table lay June's newest drawing, delivered that morning. It showed a child in a yellow hat, 3 tall uncles, a woman with salon scissors, Min with blue hair, Ms. Gong holding a spoon like a scepter, and me standing in front of a shop. Tae-sung was beside me, not larger than everyone else for once, wearing a coat with careful buttons. Above us, June had written, "Fixed things can still go outside." I placed the drawing in the front window, smoothing the tape with my thumb. Tae-sung stood at my side, close enough that our sleeves touched, waiting for permission before taking my hand again. Outside, people passed under the wet streetlights, collars raised against the cold, carrying their torn hems, missing buttons, cracked clasps, and private weather. I turned the sign from closed to open, and when Tae-sung's hand found mine, I let the door remain unlocked.